Somewhere in Texas right now, someone is standing frozen in a garage, staring at a spider on the wall, trying to remember which ones can actually kill you and which ones just look like they can. That gap between what a spider looks like and what a spider can actually do to a human body is the entire reason this list exists, and by the end of it, the spider Texans fear the most will not be the one that deserves the fear at all. Before we start ranking, drop a comment with the county you are watching from. This channel hears from viewers in nearly every region of the state, and the pattern in those comments has shaped more of this ranking than any lab report has. Start at the bottom with the spider most Texans have never heard of and the one entomologists quietly consider the most likely to actually put someone in a hospital bed. Number 5 is the brown widow, Latrodectus geometricus, an invasive species that has spread across the southern half of the state largely without public notice. It arrived through shipping and nursery trade decades ago and has since established itself in coastal counties and inland cities alike, tucked into patio furniture, mailboxes, and the undersides of playground equipment. Its reputation is close to non-existent because almost nobody outside pest control circles knows it is here at all. The reality is that its venom is, milligram for milligram, more potent than its more famous cousin, the black widow. What keeps it off the front page is behavior, not chemistry. The brown widow injects far less venom per bite than a black widow does, and it tends to deliver a dry bite, one with little or no venom at all, more often than any other widow species studied in the region. Residents who find its distinctive spiky egg sacs report them constantly to pest control operators without ever realizing what species built them. The gap here runs backward from every other entry on this list. A spider with genuinely dangerous venom, carrying almost no public fear because its bite has quietly built a reputation for being worse in theory than in practice ever demonstrates in an actual Texas backyard. Number 4 is the wolf spider, and here the gap runs the opposite direction. Wolf spiders are large, fast, hairy, and built to look exactly like something out of a nightmare, hunting on the ground instead of waiting patiently in a web, visible in headlights and porch lights across every region of the state, from the Panhandle down through the Rio Grande Valley. Their eyes catch flashlight beams and reflect back with an eerie greenish shine, a trait that has ended more than one calm evening on a rural porch. The fear they generate is enormous, amplified by their sheer size and their habit of carrying dozens of spiderlings visibly clustered on their backs, an image that circulates online specifically because it unsettles people. The actual medical risk is close to nothing. Wolf spider venom is not considered medically significant to humans in any documented case connected to the state. The worst a wolf spider bite typically produces is localized pain and swelling similar to a bee sting, resolved within a day without treatment of any kind. The gap here is almost entirely visual. This is a spider whose size and posture do all the fear-mongering that its venom was never built to back up. Number 3 is the Mediterranean recluse, a lesser-known relative of the brown recluse that has established itself in pockets of the state, largely undetected by residents who assume any recluse-shaped spider they find is the native species. It likely arrived generations ago in shipping crates and building materials, and it has since made itself at home in older structures, courthouses, warehouses, and historic downtown buildings in particular, where dark, undisturbed corners go untouched for years at a stretch. Its venom carries the same necrotic risk as its more famous relative, and its presence has been confirmed in structures across multiple counties through targeted collection studies, often in numbers that surprise the researchers doing the collecting far more than the residents living alongside it without ever knowing. What keeps it off most lists entirely is a simple identification problem. Almost nobody looks for it because almost nobody knows to look for it, which means a portion of the necrotic wounds blamed on the native brown recluse in parts of the state may actually belong to a species most residents have never once heard the name of, let alone learn to identify on sight. Number 2 is the yellow sac spider, and this is where the list starts circling back on itself. Unlike the recluse or the widow, this spider does not hide in undisturbed corners waiting for something to lean against it. It is an active night hunter, found roaming curtains, ceilings, and the corners of bedrooms far more often than any web-building species on this list, which means human contact with it is, if anything, more frequent than contact with spiders that get far more attention. For years, this small, pale, unremarkable animal was blamed for a share of necrotic wounds that turned out to have nothing to do with it. Early venom research out of Europe suggested its bite could cause tissue death similar to a recluse bite, and that findings spread through pest control literature and casual conversation long before more rigorous studies had the chance to walk it back. Later toxicology work, conducted specifically to retest the original claims, found the necrotic risk had been substantially overstated and that a genuine yellow sac spider bite typically produces localized redness, mild pain, and nothing close to the tissue destruction it was once blamed for across an entire generation of pest control warnings. This spider spent years absorbing blame that belonged somewhere else entirely, quietly rehabilitated by later science that most homeowners never heard about, and that fact alone tells you something about how fear moves through a state faster than the evidence meant to correct it ever manages to catch up. If you have ever had a wound blamed on a spider you never actually saw, put your county in the comments and tell us what the diagnosis turned out to be. That pattern, more than any single study, is what shaped where this list is about to go. Before the top of this list, consider what all 4 of these entries have in common. Every one of them is a real, identifiable animal with a documented range and a documented level of medical risk that entomologists can point to directly. That consistency is what makes what comes next so uncomfortable. Number 1 on this list is not a spider at all. The most dangerous bite in Texas statistically is not delivered by any of the species named above. It is a wound that never involved a spider in the first place, a bacterial skin infection, most commonly the drug-resistant staph infection known as MRSA, that produces a necrotic lesion nearly identical in appearance to a genuine recluse bite. Multiple studies, including several conducted specifically to test this pattern, have found that a substantial share of wounds confidently diagnosed as spider bites in emergency rooms and by patients themselves were never bites at all. No spider was ever present in the room, no venom was ever involved in the wound. What was present was an infection that spread untreated as what it actually was, because the diagnosis reached for first was the spider on the wall rather than the invisible bacteria that had nothing to do with it and everything to do with a hospital, a household, or a locker room somewhere along the line. Left untreated under the wrong assumption, that infection can progress from a localized wound to a systemic one, and in the most severe documented cases, that progression has ended in hospitalization for sepsis, a level of danger that none of the 4 confirmed spiders on this list combined come close to producing through venom alone in the entire recorded history of the state. Doctors across Texas describe the same recurring dilemma when a patient walks in, already convinced of the cause. Treating the wound as a bite means antihistamines and careful observation. Treating it as a resistant infection means antibiotics, and in the worst cases, surgical removal of dead tissue before the infection spreads further into the body. Guess wrong in either direction and the cost compounds, either an infection left to worsen under the wrong label or antibiotics prescribed for a wound that never needed them, feeding the very resistance problem that made the diagnosis so difficult to pin down in the first place. That is the gap this entire list has been building toward. 4 real spiders, each carrying a documented, measurable, and in most cases minor level of medical risk. And above all of them, an infection with no legs at all, wearing a spider's reputation because a spider was easier to blame than a resistant bacteria nobody wanted to think about crawling through their own home instead of the woodpile outside it. There is something almost unfair about that ranking if you sit with it. The brown widow, the wolf spider, the Mediterranean recluse, and the yellow sac spider have all, at some point, carried blame that belonged to something else or carried a reputation their venom never earned. Meanwhile, the actual leading cause of the wounds Texans fear most does not appear on a single entomology chart. because it was never an entomologist's problem to begin with. It sat in the space between a scared patient, an overworked emergency room, and a diagnosis reached for because it was familiar rather than because it was confirmed by anything more rigorous than a glance and a guess. Consider what that means for every one of the 4 spiders already covered on this list. Each of them has spent years being watched, studied, and cataloged by people whose entire job is to understand exactly how dangerous they are and to whom. The brown widow's venom has been measured in a lab. The wolf spider's bite has been documented case by case. The Mediterranean recluse has been collected, counted, and mapped across the buildings it quietly occupies. Even the yellow sac spider, once blamed unfairly, has since been re-examined thoroughly enough to clear its name in the scientific literature, even if that correction never quite caught up with the pest control pamphlets still warning about it. The infection sitting above all 4 of them has received nowhere near that level of scrutiny, not because it is less dangerous, but because it does not look like something worth studying as a spider problem in the first place. It looks, to almost everyone who encounters it, exactly like the animal it was never actually connected to. That is the quiet cruelty sitting underneath this entire ranking. A state full of entomologists capable of identifying a spider down to its county of origin has spent decades studying the wrong suspect for a share of its most severe wounds, while the actual cause sat in plain sight, misdiagnosed by the very system meant to catch it. None of the 4 confirmed spiders on this list asked to carry that reputation. None of them can clear it either, because the confusion was never really about them to begin with. It was about how quickly a scared patient and an overworked doctor can settle on the explanation that feels most familiar, long before either of them has any real evidence to stand on. So the next time something moves in a Texas garage in the dark space behind a stack of boxes nobody has touched since spring, remember what this list actually found. The spider on the wall is very likely not the thing to fear. What you cannot see at all, quietly spreading in a wound nobody looked at closely enough, very likely is. That does not mean the 4 spiders on this list deserve to be dismissed entirely. Respect is still owed to an animal that can, under the right circumstances, do real damage to human tissue, and nothing here argues that a brown widow or a Mediterranean recluse should be handled carelessly. What this ranking argues instead is that fear in Texas has never distributed itself evenly across actual risk. It clusters around whatever looks the most unsettling, whatever moves the fastest across a garage floor, whatever carries the most menacing name, while the quieter, less photogenic threats slide underneath the public attention entirely, doing more damage while attracting less blame. That pattern shows up again and again across this state's relationship with the animals living alongside it, and this list is simply the clearest version of it currently sitting in a Texas emergency room on any given week. There is also a harder question underneath all of this, one this list cannot fully answer. If a portion of the wounds blamed on spiders for generations were never spider bites at all, how much of what Texans think they know about these 4 species was built on cases that never should have counted toward their reputation in the first place? Every wolf spider story that turned out to be an infection, every yellow sac spider blamed before the correction caught up, every recluse bite that was never cultured, never confirmed, simply assumed. The full answer to that question does not exist yet and may never exist in a form precise enough to satisfy either side of this argument. What exists instead is a slowly growing body of research chipping away at decades of assumption, one misdiagnosed wound at a time, in a state large enough that the correction may take just as long to spread as the original fear did. Tell us below which of these 5 you have actually encountered and whether a doctor ever confirmed what really caused it, or whether, like so many Texans before you, you simply assumed and moved on.